So, my name is Pranava, and today I wanted to talk about productivity hacks with modern text editors. So, I know with text editors and such, there's religious wars on which one's the best, and we'll get into that section as well. But for now, I wanted to first start off with why, right? So, when you're dealing with logs, or if you have a corpus of text that you need to do some operations with, have you ever wanted to just do a certain set of operations? You've kind of had all the logic in your head, and you're like, I really wish I could write a script to do this, but, the time that it would take to write the script is probably longer than just doing it manually, and you know what? I'm just going to do it manually. Anyone ever been in that situation? Cool, me too. Now, any hacker will say, you know what, Pranava, I understand your problem, and there's no shortage of command line tools to deal with these things, You can use set and awk for transformations, / any other Turing complete tool. You can use editors like Vim and Max, or any other operating system, command line editor for this. And if your goal is to execute a bunch of commands in parallel, or you can use something like Xarg. So between these three things, you can get a lot done in the command line. But for me, I'm actually a very visual learner, and so a lot of command line things just don't make sense to me. One could say I chose the wrong profession in that regard, but I'm a visual learner. So this is why I wanted to talk about modern text editors, actually. Why? Because they're visual. And a lot of the modern ones, they've actually built a lot of features to be intuitive, such as multi-select, regex find and replace. And we'll go into a short demo of this. And as a result, the combination of the first two things, they're actually really great for hacking things together. Just a quick show of hands. Does anyone use Atom here? All right, maybe, okay. Sublime? All right, a little bit more. Anyone use VS Code? All right. So actually, I personally use a combination of Sublime and VS Code. I use VS Code for my day-to-day coding, and I use Sublime for any text processing that I need to do. The next slide, I'll show you a quick demo of something I wanted to do. But the idea is basically, there's nothing mind-blowing or earth-shattering that I'm going to show you. It's actually pretty obvious. But the idea is that you can use multi-select behavior and regex find and replace to do some pretty powerful things pretty quickly. So let's get started. Demo. So the goal of this exercise is to find the frequency of words per sentence. Next, once you have this frequency, print the word frequencies per sentence. This is clearly a very useful exercise, Lots of practical value, but it shows off some features, right? So the way I want to approach this is I have a corpus of text. What I want to do is transform this into a nested array of words, where then I will actually transform it into a Python array. You can actually do it into any scripting language of your choice, but the idea is quickly transform this into an array and then write some logic on top of it. So what I actually did is I broke it out into two separate files. One is sample.txt and one is textstats.py. You can actually just write the Python code directly inline, but for the purposes of this, I broke it out. At some point, I will click on this in the demo. There we go. Cool. So ideally, if I had a sentences array, I could write some quick Python code where for each sentence in this array, I would create a default dict, which is the frequency. And for each word in that sentence, I would take the lowercase representation of that word, I would increment the frequency of that word by 1, and then for each word and the count of that word, I would print out the word and its count, and I would print a new line, just for good formatting, So now all I need for this code to work is actually the sentences array, right? Okay, how do I make the sentences array? So let's start with showing off some Sublime features. I can find Command F or Control F, depending on which platform you're on, and I can type in a space. So now, you can see that when I type in space, Sublime automatically highlights all the spaces that are there. If I hit Find All, here's the cool part. In addition to just finding them, it actually gives me a cursor at every one of those points. So actually what I can do is I can hit Delete, and it'll actually get rid of all those spaces, and the cursor is still there. Which means I can hit return, and I get them all in new lines now, right? Okay, so now is where you can start getting creative, right? I've got all my words in a new line. Now, the goal was to create a nested array, right? So I want to transform this gradually into Python code. So what am I going to do next? I'm going to select caret, which in regex is the first part of every line, right? So now I have a cursor at the beginning of every one. Let's insert a quote. All right, now I can use command right to get to the end of the word boundary, which is actually important, is that it didn't catch the period or the comma. This is important. Now we can go ahead and insert another quote. Okay, so now we started to form strings, right? Now, next step in an array, you need some commas, right? So let's add a comma next to each one. Now we've got to deal with some edge cases, right? Our sentence boundaries have a comma period, and punctuation marks have comma commas. The nice thing is, because it's just find and replace, you can search for all these exceptions and deal with it in line, right? So comma commas, I'll just replace with a comma. And now comma periods, these are where I actually form my boundaries, right? So I want a nested array of words, which means I'll find all my comma periods, which are my boundaries for sentences. What I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to insert a bracket before this comma, right? And that actually forms the end of my array. After the comma, I will begin a bracket, and that'll begin the beginning brace of my next array. And now because Sublime is smart, it creates an additional one, so I'll get rid of that. And so now I basically have a bunch of arrays. And now all that's left for me to do is handle the boundary conditions, right? So on the bottom, because it was a mass find and select, I get these artifacts that I'm going to replace. So the very last one, I converted into a closing brace. And at the top, I'm going to insert a opening brace for that particular array. And now the last thing I need to do is just close off the top and insert another bracket. And now I have my nested array of arrays, which are all the words. So now I have sentences, actually. And so now I can just copy this, paste it into the first line here where sentences actually is, and voila, I have a script now that'll actually get me the original objective. So now, hopefully, well, actually, it will actually work because I recorded this. But I can just run text stats, and I get the outcome that I want, right? For every single sentence, I've printed the frequency of each word, and I've done it for every single sentence. So yeah, that's kind of the example I had prepared for you guys today. But basically, the idea here is this. When I first started doing this, I was embarrassed to show it to anyone, because I was like, oh, this is like not like high-quality code. It's like embarrassing. It's like super hacky. But then I was like, why does it matter? As long as I'm able to get through my workloads, as long as I'm able to quickly do stuff, how does it matter? I'm getting my stuff done. So like I said, this is not rocket science. It's not like blow your mind. But if anyone hasn't tried this type of stuff before, I hope it can make your life a little easier. Thank you so much to Hackernoon for having this event, and AWIP loves you guys for helping us with our content. Cool.